Buonasera a tutti. Good evening, everyone. I am Paola Bacchia and I am part of the cultural program team here at CO.A.S.IT. Before we begin, I invite you to join me in acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and we extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present here today. A warm welcome to everyone to tonight's event, Istria, Stories, Memories, Food and Music, presented by Paola Bacchia. The presentation of Istria last night was so successful that we had to hold it again today, and once again we have a full house. I sometimes speak of Italian-Australian culture as heritage with a heart, or cultura con il cuore, and perhaps this is one of the reasons why we are here together in this full room for the second day in a row. The deep emotions and the strong values that are woven into our migration stories are surely something to hold dear and something to celebrate. Tonight we have music, food and wine, and we will encounter Paola Bacchia's family history and learn about how it was impacted by the events of war and of international politics. Tonight we will be celebrating the conviviality of music and the sharing of food. In this particular case, the sharing of recipes across borders. And let us see this as a testimony to migration culture, as a culture of dialogue and of peace. Something that surely we should nurture and try to hand down to the future generations as our most precious gift. Paola Bacchia trained as a dentist and is now active as an author, cook and photographer. So far she has written 3 books: Italian Street Food, Adriatico, and the book that is being presented tonight, Istria, Recipes and Stories from the Hidden Heart of Italy, Slovenia and Croatia. A 4th book, At Nonna's Table, is forthcoming in 2024, so let's keep our eyes open for that, as well as for the cooking demonstration that Paola will be holding on the 26th of November at the Melbourne Italian Festa. As you will shortly be able to see, Istria is also an aesthetically beautiful book. So I encourage you strongly to purchase your own copy after the talk and to have it inscribed by the author. Christmas is approaching fast, so I also see Istria as a great gift for family and friends. So to begin tonight we have the talented Gabriella and Sandra Favretto, who will be performing a selection of Istrian folk songs for us. On your seats are the lyrics and translations, so you can sing along. So it's now my pleasure to pass to Sandra, Gabriella and Paola, and please make them welcome. Benvenute e grazie. Un bel applauso.
Fino a Zaragoza impegna la mia chitarra, amore, 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 amore. Da Trieste fino a Zaragoza impegna la mia chitarra, amore, amore, amore. Che Trieste è un bel fiore, ero in campagna col primo amore. Oh che bel fiore, oh che bel fiore, oh che bel fiore. Ero in campagna piglia il mio mandolino. Amor, 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 da Trieste fin Duino, con piglia il mio mandolino. Amor, 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 che Trieste sia ben fior, quiero in campagna, col primo amore. Oh, che bel fior, oh, che bel fior, oh, che bel fiore, quiero in campagna, col primo amore. Oh, che bel fior, oh, che bel fior, viva l'amor sul paion. Da Trieste fino a Pola, con figlia la mia si vola. Amor, 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 da Trieste fino a Pola, con figlia la mia si vola. Amor, 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 che Trieste sia un bel fior, quiero in campagna, col primo amore. Oh, che bel fior, oh, che bel fior, oh, che bel fiore, quiero in campagna, col primo amore. Oh, che bel fior, oh, che bel fior, viva l'amor sul paion. Nice singing over there.
Is the microphone behind there? If you can call. Oh. Yeah. Okay. That was me. That was me. I haven't even had any wine. Not yet, anyway. That's what you need. That's what I need. Thank you, Gabriella. The song that we have just sung talks about different places along the coastline that you can see there on the image. So it's a song about a man who hawks his guitar, his mandolin, his zither to travel from Zara or Zadar to Trieste, from Pola or Pula to Trieste, and from Duino, which is still Duino, to Trieste. And I put that map up just to illustrate that is Istria. That is the Istrian Peninsula with the red circle around it. But those places along the coast, they belong to the former Italian region of Venezia Giulia. Now you notice I didn't say Friuli because they were separate regions before World War II, the end of World War II, when the lands were divided. So that was the land. My father was born in Pola. I call them by their Italian names, although it's now in Croatia, which is fine, it's now in Croatia, but I know it as Paola because I'm Italian Istrian. So this is the land that my father was born into, and the Italy that he knew included Zara, Paola, and Trieste, of course. So I'm so happy to be here tonight, a second night, presenting my book, Istria. This book was written during 2020 when it was COVID lockdowns, and it was published in October 2021, and all the in-person events that I had to be cancelled. So I didn't have anything in person. I did something live, like Instagram Live, you know, the online thing, but it's not the same. So these 2 nights that I'm so happy to be here at CO.A.S.IT with you, cari amici, friends of Italy, famiglia sorelle istriane, to be here to present my book Istria. Istria is the land where my father was born and where many of our friends were born as well. And it's a land that was spoken of with great longing, with great happiness, great joy, but sadness as well. I grew up hearing about it all the time. I always spoke about Istria with great longing because it was a place that they had to leave, or they didn't have to leave, but I'll talk to you about it and why a lot of people left. so that the majority of the population who was Italian left and moved to different places around the world, and therefore their home is not the same as it used to be. So in writing my book, I wanted to capture those stories, that music, the recipes, the ones that are from Italian Istria, because Italian Istria is no longer, and the generation that came out and told those stories and spoke in that language. They're mainly not here anymore. We had one here last night, Signora Yolanda, who was 90, and it's great. Later on, she was pointing out people in the photos. Li conosco tutti, li conosco tutti. For those of you that speak dialect, it means I know everyone. So I got up there and pointed. It was funny. So tonight's presentation is about journeys. It's the journey of Istria historically, over time, to make it the place that it is. The journey of my father from Istria to Australia, a couple of other journeys of friends and how they left Istria, and also my journey to write the book, Istria. Along the way, there's going to be singing, there's food, the crostoli that I made on the weekend, 5 hours to make 400 of them with a friend. It's my mother's recipe. My mother was from Veneto, and it is something that we eat in Istria. You will find crostoli in the konobe, they're called, which is the Croatian word for taverns or restaurants internally in the peninsula.
Not as good as your mother.
Oh, no, mine aren't as good as my mother. That's my brother-in-law, by the way. Chris?
They were very good.
Thank
My
you.
mother used to make them. She's from Istria.
Thank you.
No one's worried.
Yeah, they're very good. We're going to have a catch up here.
You know what it is about when your mother or your nonna makes something? It's the memories that you've got of that aren't quite the same when you make them. Mind you, I reckon they taste like my mum. Okay, now a bit of a journey through Istria. I like to walk when I'm not going to trip over the cord. They taped it up for me last night. I was just hopping over it. So I've taken a couple of maps off the internet of Istria at different historical times that will show you its journey, I guess. So prior to 1789, for some 500 years, Istria was part of the Republic of Venice. It's physically very close to the Venetian coast. That's Istria. And that's the Republic of, well, that's after 1789. But Venice was all of this area, and it's still quite a bit in 1789. That was the Napoleonic Wars. That meant that the Austrian Empire came and took over part of Istria. You see that orange part? So Istria at this time was divided into two. There was the Venetian Istria and there was the Imperial Istria, that was the Austrian part. You'll notice Italy is not Italy. Italy did not exist at that time. It was a number of different kingdoms, republics. Sure, they spoke a similar language. Well, it's arguable that, you know, what is spoken down in the south sounds a little bit to the north, but it does sound a bit Italian. I love the south of Italy, by the way, so nothing against that, particularly Puglia and Sicilia. So 1843 sees the Republic of Venice fall. And Istria becomes Austrian. So it's fully Austrian. Trieste is Austrian. Trieste and Istria had never been part of Italy because Italy wasn't even Italy yet. Okay, so that's important to point out, I think. And it stretched down to the Dalmatian coast, down to Ragusa, which is, I think, Dubrovnik, yeah. I knew Chris would know that. That's my brother-in-law. The one who thinks my crostoli are good enough. Now, this is what happened when the Austrian Empire fell, the Hapsburg Empire. Places like Trieste, Istria, Bolzano, the South Tyrol, which is up here, they had also never been part of Italy. That was the first time they became part of Italy, which was 1919, which was at the end of World War I, when the Hapsburg Empire fell. And you'll notice that Zara, that we sang about in the song, Zara now, was Italy, and there was a little island down here called Lagosta. So, you know, the split of countries was quite different to what it is now. And that's the Italy that my father was born into. And those of you who are Istrian, maybe your relatives were born during this time too. And, you know, have since migrated to Australia, clearly. And there was Yugoslavia. Now, this postcard is from my father to his father. So Paola Bacchia was my nonno, who I never met. He died in the 50s of a kidney stone. Oh, sad. But what I love about this postcard that my father wrote from Romania to Paola Bacchia is Via Petilia 13, which was the address, 13 Via Petilia, Paola, Italia. The year is not on the postcard, but when I looked up what actually happened, he talks about a big earthquake in Bucharest. And the big earthquake happened in November 1940. It was massive. Thousands of people died, and he was in Bucharest at the time. But this postcard is very special because it tells of a time and a place. And my dad. Then post-World War II things changed, we'll talk about that later, and from post-World War II until 1992 there was the Republic of Yugoslavia, and now these are the current borders that have been there for a long time. They're stable. You'll see the Istrian Peninsula, which is the heart-shaped one there, is Croatia, nearly all. This part here is Slovenia. That little bit there, I hang on to that little bit, it's about 5 kilometres. It's the town of Muggia. It's a beautiful fisherman's village, quite close to Trieste, but it's Istria and it's Italy. So I love to say Istria, it's Italy, Slovenia and Croatia. All 3 countries at once. But there isn't much Italy there. So that's the current... That's the current way that it is geographically and historically it got to there. So, this is Rovinjo. Now, if you see it written in Croatian, please don't pronounce the J. It's not Rovinj, it's Rovinjo. So it sounds like Rovinjo without the O, which is great. When you catch a ferry from Venice, you arrive in Rovinjo. You go across the Adriatic. It's a beautiful trip to take. It runs during summer mainly rather than winter, and that is what you'll see. And it's stunning. I'd love to do that trip again. Maybe I will next year. So that's the journey of Istria. Now this is the journey of my father. My father is school photo there. He was born in 1921. We celebrated his 100th birthday 2 years ago. He wasn't around. Chris came. We cooked dishes from Istria to celebrate, and I've got a portrait, a painting of his on the wall, and we toasted it. We all drank wine to Papa. The first photo is a school. The second photo is his sister Nives, his mother, Stefania, and him at the beach in Stoja. Stoja is still called Stoja, and it's in Pola, and it's a beach right on the Adriatic. It's a beautiful place to go. The third photo is my father in very short shorts. Now you'll notice all the photos I've actually got of my father, and I did not do this on purpose, but when I did the presentation last night, every photo, I'm like, he's got shorts on again. He's got really short shorts.
Legs.
He had great legs, yeah, he did. And he would have told you that. My legs are good. But that photo, he trained in Rome as a soldier. So Italy had compulsory military service, and the war broke out, so they just started training everyone to be soldiers. And he was at the Foro Italico in Rome, so he went to Rome to train. And he was at one time the junior Italian champion of the 400 metres. So he had great legs because he ran. The fourth photo is my father in Greece, and that is during the war. He was a second lieutenant, sottotenente, and the photo wasn't labelled that it was in Greece, but there's a guy on with a little hat, so it looks Greek to me. And he spent about a year and a half in Greece. Now, he was away pretty much for the whole time during the war. He was in Bulgaria representing the Italian army for the funeral of King Boris in September 1943 when the Italians surrendered to the Allies, and so he was put in a prisoner of war camp on the Black Sea. And you know, these were times he didn't talk about. We didn't really know what happened after that, but we know in 1945, because I found a postcard written from my grandfather to his sister, that Nello è ritornato nel grembo della famiglia. Nello has returned to the womb of the family. That was July 1945. And he managed to stay there. And really what he wanted in the war was for Istria to remain Italy. It had only been Italy since 1919, like Trieste had, like Bolzano and Trento and all those towns. And unfortunately, the way that it went post-war, Italy lost the war. Come on, let's not pretend they didn't. They lost, they were bad. They were bad, they were fascist. You know, there was Mussolini. And he would say to me in dialetto, Mussolini butta via l'Istria. Mussolini threw away Istria. He just tossed it, he didn't care. That's the way he felt. He was very, very dark after the war about that. And he left. Now in Paola, which is where he's from, that is a beautiful Roman arena. He lived very close to the Roman arena. Through there you'll see the spire of the church of St. Anthony, or Sveti Anton, I think it's called now. And I took that photo last year when I was there. So, in the town of Paola, which was that one that we saw on the map, of the 32,000 residents, 28,000 left when it was decided that communist Tito, who was a communist, people were petrified of communism. And it was decided that Paola and most of Istria, there were some parts that weren't decided for a while, for some 10 years, but Paola was decided quite early, it would go to Yugoslavia. Then those 28,000 people of the 32,000 left, which is a massive, massive exodus of the Italians and the Dalmatians, so the people that were further down the coast. They decided to leave. And they were able to leave during that time, and most of them left on ships. And there's images of people boarding ships with what they could carry. What they couldn't carry, they left behind for someone to move in and put on their clothes and sleep in their beds and live in their house. Which is what happens when borders change in wars. At terrible times. And Pula was actually bombed really heavily too. There were a lot of rubble and rubbish around. So they left with what he and his sister and his parents left with what they could carry. I've got the papers at home that say 3rd of March 1947. And that was when he sadly had to leave. But look who he met. The beautiful woman on the left is my mother. So at that time, Trieste, so they hadn't decided all the borders yet. This is a really it's still a volatile period. It's still not determined what will happen. And will Trieste be part of Yugoslavia or will it be part of Italy? We didn't know. So the Allies were in there, the Americans that were controlling Trieste and some of the other towns that were just where Slovenia is now mainly, that part of the coast where it wasn't decided that it would be Yugoslavia. And so the first town over the border that was definitely Italy was Monfalcone. Monfalcone, it also had shipbuilding yards, the Fincantieri, that are still there. And so there are a lot of jobs. Although the Italians didn't want the Istrians there because jobs were very scarce post-war. So thinking, all these Istriani coming and taking away our jobs. We want, Monfalconesi should take the job. So, it wasn't easy. My mother had, her family were from Veneto, near a town near Treviso, and they'd moved to Monfalcone because they ran bars. They were in business, and it was a good place. There were a lot of soldiers going through, so they thought that they could make some money. And they had 3 bars. They had 5 children, and the 3 daughters, one worked in each bar, pretty much. My mother started working in a bar when she was like 15, taking all the money, collecting the wine and everything. So she was 19 when my father walked into the bar that was over the road from the refugee office, and they met. And if you want to hear the story, you're going to have to read the book. Because the story's in there about how my mum and dad left, but there's a beautiful letter there, and that's my dad's writing about, Perché, why are you crying those tears? You know I love you and I'll be back. So it's really lovely, really loved it. Okay. So they met, they married fairly quickly. No, there wasn't a baby in the womb. They did marry very quickly. My father found a job in the payroll office, and he lived with family. Now, in Monfalcone, there was a massive fear of the communists that were just over the border, and my mother locked my father up on many occasions so he wouldn't go to communist demonstrations, anti-communist demonstrations, because he would have been punching communists and ended up in jail. So he got locked up in the bedroom a bit, and he wasn't very happy. So they decided to go to Paris and to see if they might like to live there. My mother had an aunt in Paris and some cousins, but that didn't work out. And then they they heard that America and Australia were taking migrants on a sponsored migrant program. Now, my father wanted to go to America because he was tall. Obviously, he was tall. You look at me. And he wanted to play basket. They called it basket, which is basketball. So he wanted to, get into the basketball team, but there was a really long wait to get a ship to America. So they came to Australia instead. They were in camps for 9 months. A camp in Rome near Cinecittà, which is, if you know anything about Italian movies, that's where they made a lot of movies, particularly post-war. And then they went down south to Bari, to Barletta, and eventually got on a ship. That photo up the top is an amazing photo. My father had a camera, which was wonderful because he managed to capture these images of people waiting for the ship with all those suitcases in place, just standing there with all the stuff that they could carry to their new land, as well as photos of Mum, she's gorgeous, on the ship, and Dad. So now, a sad story about when they left was my grandparents, so my mum's parents, who hadn't really been outside of Veneto or Monfalcone, they thought they'd surprise their youngest daughter who was going to go away so far by travelling down by train. They arrived the day after the ship left. So they never, my mum didn't see her father till 1963. So, we could, and you know how we've got Skype and we talk, and people go, oh, but you're so far away. It's like, yeah, no, you're not. That's really far away. That's really hard when all you had was aerograms because phone calls were so expensive. If you remember, if you've got relatives in Italy, you remember 40 years ago, L'Italia, presto, vieni parlare. It's like, come and talk quickly. Italy's calling. They'll talk for 5 minutes because that's all the time you've got. And you'd say, ciao, 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 and then that would be it.
Il tempo com'è?
And what you'd talk about was, che tempo fa là? What's the weather like? It's like you've got 5 minutes, you haven't talked for 6 months, and you talk about the weather. Thanks, Chris. I did. It's crazy. The other thing that's quite funny that I was telling Gabriella before is for their wedding, my grandparents had given them some money. They didn't have much money. My father arrived with 2 cardboard suitcases from Istria because they had to leave all their stuff there. And my mum wasn't from a family that was, that well off. Sure, they had bars, but they didn't, Anyway, they gave them money. And my father, when they were in Naples, somewhere down south, people were selling things quite cheaply on the street, and he was always like, his stomach and food was so important to him. So the things that were important were things that would support food making or something. So he came back with a beautiful set of 24 pieces of solid silver cutlery, which would be really useful in their new country, but it was 3/4 of the amount of money that they'd been given. With the rest of the money, he bought a camp stove so my mum could cook, because in Australia, clearly, they didn't have cooking devices. So nearly all the money was gone. But at least they had a little camp stove and really beautiful cutlery that I've got now, by the way. It's beautiful, very heavy. So, you know, Bonegilla. Yeah, they went to Bonegilla. They were there for 5 weeks and we heard stories about it all the time. If you had relatives in Bonegilla, I'm sure you heard about the food, how bad it was. Like, to talk through a few photos. They were there at a time actually when there were 7,000 people. So the camp could fit about 5,000, so it was overflowing. So my father was in a tent with other 2,000 people that couldn't fit in the actual army barracks that were converted. Now, they were converted by making them into 10 beds with curtains between them. And that was where my mum and children were staying. This photo, this Albury 1950. My father's got a three-piece suit on. My mum's got a beautiful fur coat, and they turn up in Albury looking like that. Here, they're in the bush. They've got suits on and everything. They've come to Australia so far away with everything they own, and it's just not appropriate for the Australian bush. It's look, they look like movie stars. They look great, but you know, like, can you imagine the people there? Now, dressed like that, they went to the pub because my mum, you know, her family ran bars, so of course you'd go for a drink. You're in town. That's what you do. You go for a glass of wine. Good luck finding any wine. That's 1950. They went into the bar. My mother was shooed out. You can't go to a public bar. You go to the ladies' lounge. They said it was barbaric because, you know. Anyway, the other 2 photos are food preparation. Of course they are. Up at the top, they're cooking with the stove that my father bought with the money that was from the wedding gift, and they're cooking between some sheets because then they won't get caught. They won't get seen between those sheets. It's a bit of a stage photo, I think, because my mum's knitting at the same time. It's a bit crazy. The bottom photo there on the left is of a picnic. And they're eating spaghetti and they're posing clearly. Maybe they found some in Albury, but it's also got 5 bottles there. So I don't know what they were drinking, but 5 bottles of beer or wine or who knows. But anyway, their journey was pretty good, I guess. To Australia, after 5 weeks, they got placed into a camp in Williamstown and then found jobs and settled in. There were other people that left Istria where the journey wasn't as easy. This is 1951, and you can see that arena that I showed you before in Paola. And some family friends, Riccardo and Maria, decided to stay. He was a dentist. Bit of a coincidence there. But he was a dentist, and he thought, well, no, I can work with the communists here. You know, we'll get a good job. It'll be okay. They had 2 children, but it didn't work out. But they couldn't just leave. They couldn't just go, hey, we're just going to go to Italy, or we're going to go to Australia. They weren't allowed to leave. Now, this is a time when it changed administration, you could not speak Italian in the streets. You'd get arrested. You can't do that. You had to hide the fact you're Italian. Administration changed. Suddenly, at the town hall, they only spoke Croatian. They didn't speak Italian. All the schools were in Croatian, but not in Italian. It was a really difficult time. All the streets changed names. Like, they all changed names because they gave them different names, a different country. Very difficult time. But they decided to try and stay there for a while, but in the end, they decided they couldn't. So Maria took the 2 children up to her mother in Gorizia. Now, Gorizia, if any of you know, that's in Italy, but that had also a terrible fate when they divided the borders up because they split the town in half. Half was in Yugoslavia and half was in Italy. So you might live in Italy and then your work is in Yugoslavia. How are you going to do that? You're not going to do that. So that was very disruptive. Anyway, Maria went up with the children to Gorizia, stayed there and waited for her husband. Riccardo and his brother-in-law, Maria's brother, got the things that were important to them and bundled them into a rowboat that they stole. They stole a rowboat, they put in all the dentist tools. Need to get a job eventually, don't you? And all their gold. put them in the rowboat and waited for a night when it was foggy, when they wouldn't be seen, and started to row towards Italy. Now they believed that they were being chased, so they threw the dental tools and the gold over into the Adriatic. But they arrived in Italy and eventually joined Maria and came here. But somewhere goes diving around Paola, you know, who knows, you might get some gold or some dental tools. I don't do clinical work anymore, so that may be to me. Another story I wanted to talk about is the story of Alice and Erminio and their children are here. Tamara and Sandra are here again tonight. They came last night and they're here tonight. I love that. Thank you, ladies. And I'm going to read something from the book. Alice actually came out on the same ship as my parents on the General Greeley, which is amazing. Is that microphone on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Erminio and Alice had gone to school together in Torre, which is Torre di Parenzo. The years after Istria was ceded to Yugoslavia were difficult ones, and when Erminio was 18 in 1949, he and two friends plotted their escape. In the dead of the night, without telling anyone, they took a rowboat. Familiar story, hey? If you had a rowboat then, you'd lock it up. And rowed along the coast to the Italian border. They were stopped by the Italian carabinieri, who are the police. And as they had no identity papers, they threw them in jail. But they were grateful because they were in Italy. There was no way of sending news back to Torre, so the tiny community, having woken up to empty beds and a missing rowboat, assumed the worst. So the family thought they were dead. Because what do? They escape and you don't hear anything. Now, I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story, you have to get the book. But they do make it to Australia, and they meet again in the camp in Cinecittà, which is the camp that my parents were at actually. And there is a bit of an exchange, and then they meet again in Australia. And Erminio passed away quite recently, which was sad, but I did get to meet him and spend some time with him and get produce from his beautiful vegetable garden. So thank you to Paola and Sandra for, sharing the story. And that bracelet has a really cool story. It's not just pretty. Okay, so there's some journeys of people who left Istria. And now I wanted to talk a bit about my journey to write the book. Now, my love of food was inspired by the way that we ate at home. That's my mum with her crostoli, the one that you're eating tonight, the same recipe. God, it was hard to get the recipe from her. Can I just say that she never measured anything? She did a bit of that and a bit of that and a bit of that. No, I have to measure it. But I did manage to get it eventually. And frittole, and my father making prosciutto, and my father's amazing garden. We ate seasonally, everything was fresh. My father would say, that radicchio you're eating, it was growing 1 hour ago. You should be so lucky. So to read from the book again. Food, both eating it and growing it, was central to my father's life. He was house proud, and when we bought a new house in 1973, he dug out a wine cellar underneath it using a crowbar to break the dense clay. It took him years, but storage of wine to an Istriano is as important as the house above it. He built a double garage, and his workbench and tools occupied one half of it, and he made bookshelves and tables. He wallpapered the walls and ceiling of the house. He did. But our lounge, do you remember, Chris, our lounge room had wallpaper? He tended to a prolific vegetable garden, growing beans, figs, plums, tomatoes, garlic, and the leafy greens, radiceto, that he had grown up with. Weekends in the home were for working, not relaxing. He would walk into the kitchen at 11:30 in the morning on Saturdays, wearing his work shorts, of course, and his singlet, no matter what season it was, and place a hand against the wall and exclaim, "Livia, dame de mangiare, che me trema le gambe." "Livia, prepare some food, my legs are shaking." Like many Italians, he was prone to drama and a bit of exaggeration. He really was. "Livia, mi trema le gambe." Say that all the time. Vedo scuro davanti gli occhi. I can see like black in front of my eyes. I'm so hungry. God, Papa, hey? So why did I write this book? Well, it's an ode to my people, you know, the people who had to leave at the end of World War II, who were displaced, who never really found a home that is in one place. Our homes were everywhere. I sought to capture these memories now because that old generation is passing, is moving on, and to try to capture those memories, those stories, those recipes before they disappear, and to give a home to our Istrian-Italian memories. Because in a few generations they won't remember that Istria was Italian, and we sang those songs, you know. So for me it was really important to capture this time and place in my book, as well as the recipes. Now, Paola, or Pula, if you want to be politically correct, has the most amazing central market. It was one of my inspirations in writing about food, is going to the market in Pula. The central parts, the central rows, are where le donne vecchie, the older ladies, they grow the produce about 10 kilometres from Pula and bring it in fresh every day. The produce is just amazing. The giant apricots, cherries. So this was taken in May. There's tomatoes, they're ready for sauce in beautiful wooden boxes. Radiceto, which they call radice. You know, that's Cicoria zuccherina di Trieste is the actual name of it. And it's this little lettuce that's about that big, cicoria, which is sweet, come il veludo, Papa would say, like velvet to eat when it's the first cut. And rucola, which they call rocula, rocket.
Yeah.
Now, note size of leaf. Growers in Australia, we do not want leaves that are that big. We want leaves that are that big. When it's sweet and tender, not the tough stuff you get here. The Pula market is absolutely beautiful. If you go to the town, please go there early in the morning at 6 o'clock. If you can get up that early, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it, yeah. And look, in the building that's there, you will find them speaking dialetto, our dialect, and drinking grappa, because, hey, it's a good way to wake up, isn't it? Bicchiering de grappa. Now, this is my mum and dad in the late 80s. I think my sister took that photo. Did you? Okay, the photographer's here, sorry. Photographic credit to Chris Davey. It's really well scented, Chris. Thank you. It's in the town of Parenzo, which leads us to our next song, La Mula de Parenzo.
mamma che sociale, niente bacala, perché non m'ami più. Perché a si piccoli che le locali che Marietta dammele sul canapè, Marietta dammele sul canapè, Marietta dammele per carità. Perché a si piccoli che le locali che Marietta dammele sul canapè, Marietta dammele per carità, per carità.
That song is about a girl in Parenzo, or Porridge as it's called now, and apparently she had a shop that sold everything except for bacala. I don't think it's a food shop.
There may be several meanings.
There's one verse that's wonderful, that's La mia amorosa vecchia la tengo de riserva, which is my old girl. I keep her as a spare. And when the grass grows, like I take her out to pasture. Crazy. Anyway, these songs are sung in our dialect. Now, our dialect is a Venetian dialect. It's a Venetian variant. You could call it Istrian, Triestino. It's very similar. Monfalconese, Polesang. But it's got some of the words are different. The beautiful thing about dialetto or dialect is it's a spoken language. It's not a written language, and it changes with time and place. In fact, when I go to Trieste, I love going to Trieste because it feels like Venezia Giulia, like, you know, where my dad is from. It feels very much part of my culture. And they speak dialetto in the shops. And when I go in, so I talk to them, ciao signora, you know, come over. And they say, I'll say it in dialect first, and then I'll translate. Vieni, ascolta sta mula che la parla come mia nonna. Which means, come and listen to this woman, she sounds like my grandmother. Now, what that means is that I'm speaking a dialect that was brought out to Australia in 1950. And in the place, in Trieste, it's changed a bit because dialects change with time, different words come in. And they say, ma se anche bene che la parla come un'australiana, that I've got an Australian accent and speak like like their grandmother. So it's and I feel, yeah, that's nice, kind of. Thank you. Yeah, okay, so back to my book. Now, so the market really inspires me in Paola. Paola, God, if my dad was alive. Kosti rachami Paola, se Paola. Why are you speaking Croatian? So I get my inspiration from the marketplace, from recipes that people have given me, Istriani. I got some recipes from Alice, Arminio and Alice, Sandra and Tamara's mother. Tamara kindly shared some recipes with me, which is lovely, and they're in the book. I got some recipes from my Santo La Gemma, who's my godmother, who's 97, so couldn't be here today. But she came out here in 1949. She was the first of our friends to come out here. A lovely woman. So from the people of that time who cook a certain way, and it's home cooking with ingredients like a lot of potatoes, a lot of beans, you know, a lot of simple meats. I also used old cookbooks from people of the area. There's the Maria Stelvio, Cucina Triestina, if any of you know that book. There's books by a lady called Eta Marchesa Polesini, who married the Count Polesini, who was Istrian royalty. He was made a count during the family was made a count, or, you know, became royals during the Venetian period. And she was called Marchesa, Marquise. And she wrote a series of 5 beautiful paperback books. I've managed to get my hand on 3 of them, and they were published in the 30s. The other 2, which are the cakes one and the biscuits one, I reckon people have used them so much that they're falling apart because they're paperbacks. A book by Caterina Prato, who was an Austrian lady, because Istria was part of Austria. So some of the recipes that are in there are inspired by the time of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, by Italy, by recipes that I think my grandmother would have cooked. My grandmother was part Austrian. also by, this one's actually inspired by a fantastic restaurant that is probably no longer in Williamstown that was called Ragusa after Dubrovnik, and this was the black gnocchi. They had squid ink gnocchi and on the menu there, and I thought, and the guy who ran it, he was great. He'd bring out some grappa for you to drink after your meal. That's all, like free, just have some grappa, which is always a beautiful sign of hospitality. Yeah. Stuffed peppers with the filling that's sort of, it's got paprika in it and cumin, inspired by a recipe from the town of Fiume, or Rijeka now, which was quite Austro-Hungarian Fiume. This is inspired by, this is a recipe again from someone from the area. They were here last night, Signora Yolanda. It was her mother-in-law, Anita. And they lent me a book that had 10 apple cake recipes. And it also had 10 recipes with potatoes. I told you, Istrians with apples, potatoes, beans, we just have so many recipes. So recipes that speak of home, that are very familiar. And since I've written the book in the last 2 years, I've received feedback and thank you notes from lots of people, including people who are Slovenian or Croatian. And the recipes are just as familiar to them because they're Istrian. It doesn't have, the country doesn't matter. It really, to me, it doesn't matter. What happened, happened. It's food of the area. Now I'd like to read, this is the last one I'll read from the book. And it's a story about playing cards. Last night, when Signora Yolanda was here, she said, "Mamma, li conosco, she could name, I know them, she could name all the people in the photo. I mean, her husband was there too, Bibo.
Oh, wow.
And that's my uncle, see you there?
Bibo.
Yeah.
Bibo.
Bibo was a lovely man. Okay, so all our Istriani friends were card players, and a get-together invariably involved card games. It went something like this. The men, uomini, would be in one room, usually a dining room that had a large table. There'd be a pack of cards, le triestine, colourful Italian playing cards in a pack of 40, with images of clubs as giant sticks, cups, coppe that look like chalices, swords and coins. The men, up to 4, would play games such as tresette or briscola. The ones who were not playing got involved too, standing behind, cheering them on. "Butta quella, no, what have you done?" Or decrying when they played a bad card. The door to the room would be closed to contain the cigarette smoke and the noise, though it didn't do either very well. There were occasional shouts, exclamations rather than words, and swearing, usually in Istrian Venetian dialect, but sometimes in Croatian. They didn't know much Croatian except for the curses. Now, last night there were some curses that I knew, and a lady came up to me later who was Croatian. She said, "What were they? Whisper in my ear." So I did, and she's like, "I can't even say that in English." Sorry, getting back to the story. For the curses. That was, there were occasional shouts rather than exclamations, and that was followed by calls for the women, for food or wine. "Livia," my father would call out. "Gavemo fame, portine de mangiare." "Livia, we're hungry, bring us some food." It was a call to action, not a question. The women would be in the kitchen. They'd be preparing food or have set food out on the table waiting for that call. They'd be chatting or playing their own card game, ramino, occasionally chastising their husbands in the other room for being too loud or swearing or smoking too much. Upon hearing the call, the ladies would scoop up the platters and enter the men's domain, waving away the clouds of smoke. I can remember it walking like back in the days when everyone smoked. Waving away the clouds of smoke. They would clear the empty glasses to make space for trays of salami, prosciutto, cheese, olives, pickled vegetables, fried sardines, baked mussels and bread. The next request, of course, was for more wine. And as we say, or rather sing, "Ancora un litro de quel bon," another liter of the good stuff. Un litro de quel bon. Ancora mitra de quel bon prendiamo a casa. And then we'll go home. Another liter of the good stuff, and then we'll go home. And the next line is non gole chave del portone. I don't have the keys to the front door. God, drinking songs. Okay, now this is my father's house in Via Petilia, number 13, in both images. That one there. Chris, did you take that one too?
No, Barbara took that one.
My sister took that one. On the left is my father in the late 80s in front of the house that he had to leave. It was still Yugoslavia then, and it was pretty run down. Communist countries they didn't have a lot. It's since improved hugely. It's fantastic over there. I love going back there. This is taken last year of me. Now you can see it's the same gate. It's the identical gate, and it's the columns. The numbers have changed. They confused us all by turning that to number 17 rather than number 13. But the weird thing is that it's turned into a Seventh-day Adventist church. And an even weirder thing was last night, someone came up to me when I was signing books, and he said, my mother is from Paola, she's Seventh-day Adventist, and she went to that church every Saturday. And I'm like, oh my God, we've never been open. Clearly we haven't visited on a Saturday. And I'd love to see the inside. He said, go there on a Saturday and they might let you inside. I don't know if they will, but it would be wonderful. But it's a Seventh-day Adventist church. My dad, who loved wine so much, I don't think Seventh-day Adventists drink. This house doesn't look like much of a house. It's in central Istria. On the left, you've got my papa, and he's wearing shorts again. Like, really, seriously, I did not pick these photos on purpose, and look how short they are. He had great legs. He's with his first cousin, Ali there. They were really close, and they're on the steps of their grandparents' house. That is in the town called, well, it's just out of a tiny town called Kersano. In Croatian, it's called Krša. And it's actually not in Krša, it's in a hamlet called Bacchi, which is the Croatian variant of Bacchia, is where our family come from. Bacchia all come from central Istria. I believe in that Ancestry.com thing. I know most people don't. I don't know how much science there is in it, but gotta have fun looking at it. And all the people from the surname of Bacchia, they're all from central Istria. Actually, that is our place. This is me and my cousin Ernie. So we are sort of the next generation down. Our grandparents were born in that house. So my nonna Matteo was born in that house, and his grandmother was born in that house because they were brother and sister. And Ernie, I met him a few years ago, and he's hilarious. He met me at 10 o'clock at the only sort of shop in Krša, in Kersano. It's 10 a.m, he's got a cigarette and a beer. He's like, ciao, Paola. He's great, Ernie. And I'd never been to this house, and he took me there, which was lovely, and then took Chris and Barbara there, who were also at a separate time. Oh no, I took you there, he'd taken me there. And this house is abandoned now, but it has been left in inheritance to the only other Bacchias in Australia, which are my cousins Stephen and Michael in Adelaide. There's no other Bacchias in Australia. Now, when I was I went to, Ernie is Slovenian, he lives in Isola, and so I spent a day with him as well, and his father, Ottavio, who was still alive then, and Ottavio was also from Kersano. And I spoke to Italian in dialect. He was pretty deaf and almost blind, so I was yelling, Signor Ottavio, Son Paola, a key? He was gorgeous, but I managed to ask him things about, he actually knew my grandfather. I didn't know anyone else who knew my grandfather because he died in the early 50s. I said, Signor Ottavio, tell me, what language did they speak in the house in Kersano? Like, my father only spoke Italian and swore in Croatian, and spoke a bit of German because his grandfather on his mother's side had been Austrian. And Signor Ottavio said to me, Croato, non ti parli croato ti? Croatian, don't you speak Croatian? I'm like, what? I'm not Croatian. And I immediately sent a message to my sister in Australia and said, Barbara, I've got Croatian blood. I don't know. Because Chris, hadn't you always said that if she's Croatian, you're divorcing her?
I said, that's where her temper comes from.
But, you know, and I think that's just, I am so proud and happy to be of mixed culture. And border communities are so rich. I'm Italian. I feel very Italian, but I'm Istrian-Italian. That makes me a bit Croatian, a bit Slovenian, a bit Austrian. And wow, that's wonderful. And pulling all those together, I've written a cookbook that's got those influences. So I'm just, and we should be really proud of where we're from. This nationalism is just rubbish. I'm Istrian. I don't care what country it is, really. So, okay, now it's time for the last song. I'll just point out that's the town of Fazana. I can't think of what it's called in Croatian, but over the road, over there is the island of Brioni, which is where Tito had his zoo. And he's still got some animals left over. It's a fabulous place. And here's some grappa infusions that I made for the book. So now we're going to sing a song.
He also had the only Cadillac in Croatia.
Did he?
It's still there.
Really?
Yeah, it's there. It's locked up.
Yeah.
It's in a. Yeah.
Now this is a kind of this is a fun song. It's a very fast song, and you'll
Politically
get the
incorrect.
hang of it. Very good. Chris, do you know it?
Politically incorrect.
No, Chris,
I know it. No.
Chris, you'll sing the verse with me, won't you? Okay. Last night my sister came up in front to sing with me, but she's not here, so Chris will sing over there.
I can do it for
Okay.
Go su mare, go alla figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, era goba anche quella, go su mare, go alla figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, la famiglia dei gobon. Il gobbo Gedeone, la Geppina prende in sposa con la gobba bianca e rosa, con la gobba bianca e rosa. Il gobbo Gedeone, la Geppina prende in sposa con la gobba bianca e rosa, la famiglia dei gobon. Come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, era goba anche quella, come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, la famiglia dei gobon. A celebrare le nozze il canonico nozziero, con la gobba passatero, con la gobba passatero. A celebrare le nozze il canonico nozziero, con la gobba passatero, la famiglia dei gobon. Come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, era goba anche quella, come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, la famiglia dei gobon. Nel mezzo della festa dei vari suonatori, con la gobba anche lori, con la gobba anche lori. Nel mezzo della festa dei vari suonatori, con la gobba anche lori, la famiglia dei gobon. Come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, era goba anche quella, come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, la famiglia dei gobon. E dopo 9 mesi, anche lui col suo pupino. E dopo 9 mesi che è nato un bel bambino, anche lui col suo bambino, la famiglia dei gobon. Come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, era goba anche quella, come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era goba anche quella, la famiglia dei gobon. E dopo che sei morto lo ha messo in una cassa, anche quella con la passa, anche quella con la dopo che sei morto e lo messo in una casa, anche quella cosa passa la famiglia dei Gobò. E come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era Goba, anche quella era Goba, anche quella, come su mare, come la figlia della sorella, era Goba, anche quella, la famiglia dei Gobò. Sola della casa che ha messo ancoletti, anche quei colori gobetti, anche quei colori gobetti. È sola della casa che ha messo ancoletti, anche quei colori gobetti, la famiglia dei Gobò. Come su mare, come l'amore della sorella, era Goba, anche quella era Goba, anche quella. Come su mare, come l'amore della sorella, era Goba, anche quella, la famiglia dei Gobò. E come su mare, come la mia della sorella, era Goba, anche quella era Goba, anche quella. Come su mare, come l'amore della sorella, era Goba, anche quella, la famiglia dei Gobò.